You are listening to Exploring Sacred with your host, Denise Iwana Francisco, on the Temple Within Radio and Digital Media Network, giving voice to the sacred.
Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to the year 2019, and welcome to a brand new day in your life, right? It's a brand new day. It's a brand new year. And every moment, as a matter of fact, is an opportunity to begin again and to rethink some things, to look at things in a new perspective, in a new light, and move forward with new understandings about yourself. And that's exactly what this show is about this morning. We're in this season, at least here in this part of the world, in the northern hemisphere, called winter, the time of the return of the sun. And yet, at the same time, it is the time on the medicine wheel, or the Chongleshka, of going within, of slowing down a little bit. This morning, I woke up to a beautiful white layer of snow out here in the enchanted forest. Absolutely spectacular view of the forest with a carpet of white. And for me, whenever I see that, a fresh bed of snow, it makes me pause and take a deep breath and settle in for just a moment anyway. It's almost as though that carpet of snow gives me permission to slow down, to just be. And why is it that it sometimes takes that in order to just be? Good morning, Robin McCarthy. It is good to see you. The chat room is open, everybody, so please do feel free to join us in the chat room here on Spreaker. It's good to see you there, and I can see you here in the studio. There are times in our lives, and the seasons help us with that, frankly. So whether we are in places where the winter doesn't gift us with any snow, perhaps just maybe a little bit of a cooler temperature, the winter, the season itself, actually corresponds with our own innate wisdom that says it's time to slow down. It's time to go within. It's time to reflect. And so we often find ourselves during these winter months being tugged at, our heartstrings being tugged at, memories coming to the surface, maybe woulda, coulda, shouldas coming to the forefront of our mind, of our thoughts. We may find ourselves spending a little extra time with a hot cup of tea or a hot cup of coffee or any other sort of beverages, right? Thinking about auld lang syne, about the old days. Isn't it amazing how we can glamorize the old days? How we can take experiences of our lives, and over time it's like they've become like tumbled stones, tumbled rocks. And that time seems to polish our memories and our experiences into something that we wouldn't recognize, right? I'm just going to cozy up closer here to the speaker for a moment with my cup of coffee. All of the experiences of our lives, they are like those tumbled, uncut stones, right? They're uncut, and over time, sometimes those experiences, those jagged, rocky, craggy experiences through the time machine of life and experience, all of a sudden they become a little more polished and unrecognizable from the way that we experienced them or the way that we've seen them and felt them when we first encountered them. It's usually in the times of looking back where we hopefully can have a little bit of 2020 vision and understanding. Why did that happen to me as a child? Oh, now I can see it a little more clearly. Why didn't that happen for me as a child? Oh, okay, now I have a little deeper understanding. The same can be said of those tumbled stones, that we can either learn from the stones in the tumbler and move along, right? Or not. This time of the year really gives us pause to reflect upon those stones that we continue to carry along in our pocket, right? Either as a protective ally. I learned my lesson from that. I'm not going to do that again. Right? Little reminders of our wisdom. I call those wisdom stones. They're those little stones that we pick up along the way, and perhaps we place them in our pocket. And there are wisdom stones. And we can reach into our pocket of memories and experiences and understandings and say, aha, but I learned about this. I'm different because of this. I'm enhanced because of this. I'm more joyful because of that. I'm more bitter because of that. I'm wiser, clearly, because of that experience. And then we have those stones that we pick up along the way in our life. They're in the darkened times. We call them the darkened times because they're uncertain times. They're times of uncertainty. They're times of tumult. And this is the season to reflect on those. And what about those big old boulders of tumultuous times that sometimes we wrap around our ankles and we schlep around? Right? It reminds me of Jacob Marley from the Christmas Story, A Christmas Story. Charles Dickens. What about those stones and boulders of times past that perhaps we carry around our neck like a big old albatross? This is the season to let those go. The season of winter. The season of the bear. Going within, reflecting, looking at our pile of stones, our wisdom stones. I happen to believe that every experience of our life can potentially help to make us wiser, or it can also potentially weigh us down. They can weigh us down to the point of literally suffocating the life out of our life. And so I invite you here in this new year, in this time of winter or in the time of summer, wherever you happen to be, it is a new year, whether you're in summer season or winter season, to take a look at the stones that you've been carrying around from the darkened places and bring them into a moment of light. Reflect on them, hold them, touch them, be with them. If you need to see somebody to help you go through the experience, do that, whether it's your minister or your rabbi, a good friend, a spouse, a family member, a therapist. Time to sort through those stones and keep the little wisdom stones tucked away in your pocket. Get rid of those albatross stones that are slowing you down, weighing you down, or perhaps even crushing the joy out of your life, right? Slowing your step down. Got to slow to your roll. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share this thread on Facebook so that others can go ahead and join in our conversation. Seems like the easiest way to do that. There we go. Excellent. All right. Excellent. So if you're there on the Exploring page on Facebook, the link is now posted for you to join in the conversation, because if you're listening to this, you also have stones around your neck perhaps, and manacled or monocled or whatever that word is to your ankle, and you're dragging it around, schlepping them around like Jacob Marley. Or we can let those bad boys go. Good morning, Julie Fortino Shirtlift. It is so good to see you. Fun to watch your boys grow up. Since I've known them since they were itty bitty babies. It's amazing. They're young men now. Young, beautiful men now. This idea that we have to carry around the stones. You're not stoned, Rob. That's good. Right? Sometimes we do get stoned, right, in order to not deal with our stones, or we get stoned in order to deal with our stones, both, right? To kind of numb the effects of, dang, I got to take a look at that stone right now. And I got to let that sucker roll. Rolling stone. Interesting. In the past week or so, it's been very fascinating for me because for Christmas, Todd purchased for me an Ancestry.com kit. And what a blessing that people from both sides of my ancestry, my mother's people and my father's people, have reached out to me and said, you know, the moment I saw your face on the Ancestry site, I knew that we were related. And the other day I received a photograph of my father. And there is no denying, let's just say, that he's my daddy. And, you know, it's funny, in my life, because of the way that I was created, you know, many years, my adoptive father, the Sarge, came to me in a dream, and he had me meet my biological father. And by God, the photo that I received the other day is exactly the man that came to me in the dreams with my dad. And, you know, here is his face. And looking at the story of my father's people, going back in history to Clan MacDonald. Apparently that is the clan that my father's people come from, on his father's side anyway. Clan MacDonald. But taking a look at those stones, right? Those unknown stones. 56 years of unknown stones kind of weighing around, and then finally to see the faces and to see the stories, the captions on Ancestry, and to see my cousin Corey for the first time. She and I did a Skype session, right? Fascinating. Unturned stones, turning those stones over, and what are they revealing in those darkened places from my past, those unknown places. Good morning, Katie. Rob says, I meant in the biblical sense, I'm not stoned. Yeah. Oh my. And to think that people are still being stoned in this day and age, let alone getting stoned, or being stoned for getting stoned, right? All that good stuff. But fascinating to unturn those stones and to dust off the moss and to take a look at the photo and the photos and to learn the stories. And Todd said to me yesterday, he was away on business, and he called and he said to me, honey, how are you dealing with all this? It's a lot of information. It's a lot of information, rapid fire, and a lot of faces, rapid fire, and people. And it's very joyful for me. You know what? No matter what the story is, everything happens for a reason. My adoptive families are here for a reason, etc., etc. So taking the time during this winter to really be with that, to look at those faces and to look at the stories, to know that great-granddaddy, you know, was a plantation owner. He had a great big plantation down there in the deep south of Georgia, my great-grandfather. And to take a look at that, my feelings about that. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And what a joy to be so welcomed. To be so welcomed by relatives that I know in my soul. I've always known in my soul. We have a soul connection. What a joy. What an absolute joy. Coming out of darkened times, you know, last time we were all together on the show, we were talking about why it is that we go into those dark places, into those dank places, and have those experiences of darkness, because it would seem that the only light that we'll do in those places is ours. Right? This human life is not meant for anybody of a weak constitution. That is for certain. That is for certain. But we all find ourselves sometimes in these darkened places where we can find ourselves perfectly and utterly alone. And we come back out into the light of day with this knowledge, these experiences. And what do we do with the experiences? What do we do with the experience of losing relationships? That can be a really tough one. I'm helping a very dear family member, a couple of them, through that right now. What happens when a relationship ends and you go into the darkness of separation? Into the scary territory of, oh my God, now what? What's next? And on the other side of that, we all know, those of us with a few miles, right, on our odometer, we know that after all is said and done, we can look back and say, okay, now I get it. But damn, that hurt while I was there. That hurt. I didn't think I was going to live through that, right? We all have had those times where we've thought, I didn't think I was going to make it through that. And I did make it through, and I'm a better person, or I'm a wiser person. My eyes have been opened. Sometimes once our eyes have been opened following a situation or an experience, we can find ourselves dozing off again, can't we? Being lulled right back into that same sort of an experience. And the spirit of wisdom comes and taps us on the shoulder and said, don't you remember, you just went through that. You just went through that. You really want to go back there again? And what is your attraction to being in that place? You found your way back out to the light. What do you want to go back into that hovel for? Well, maybe there's more work to do. Maybe there is unfinished business. But with a few miles on the odometer, we all come to understand that once we get through the hard stuff, and sometimes it's really hard stuff that can cause the death without dying, we know what that is. Everything, or most of everything that we've ever known or ever experienced dies away, it falls away. And what do we do standing there in our nakedness or our part nakedness? Now what do? I let all that go. I've learned from it. I'm ready for something different and for something new. Now what do? You know, this past Saturday, I want to give a great big shout out to the Unity Church of Grand Rapids there in Walker. I was invited to speak, and it was a packed church. It was so fun. It was absolutely packed. And it was nice to be there, not as a minister, but to be there as a guest speaker. Right? There's a different feeling when I'm standing behind the pulpit, as they say, and just kind of sitting down on a stool and walking and talking with people. It's a different feeling, and I like it. I like being with the people in that way. Anyway, the church was packed, and we were talking about experience and why it is that we're sometimes called into the dark places, and what do we do after we've been there? What do we learn? What do we gain? What are we ready for? Does our heart close because of those experiences, or do we become like the Buddha Hote? Hote, that particular personification of the Buddha of joy and compassion, is my favorite. You know which one he is. He's the one with the big old smile on his face and a great big Buddha belly, I call it. And they say, those that have written about it, say that the reason that the Buddha Hote, H-O-T-E-I, has that great big belly of compassion is that he's gained compassion through the experiences of the world, of his world, of being in this world. And the joy on his face, much like the laughter of the Dalai Lama, comes from understanding that this lifetime is very temporary. This experience is an experience that our soul has chosen to take. Some of it is absolutely splendiferous, if that's even a word. I guess it is now that I've said it, splendiferous. And some of it is absolutely excruciatingly painful. but it is simply an experience. It is an experience that our soul is having, that our body, our mind, our spirit, our emotions dances with, becomes ensconced in. But in the ultimate end, it is an experience of the soul, of our spirit. And we can become joyful in any experience, joyful that we can take a look at it and say, oh, I am so glad that I let that go. Dang, I didn't even know that it was really there. I didn't know it was weighing me down until I really took a look at it and let it go, and I feel much freer. And what about those moments of light and inspiration that we also experience during the darkest times and the revelation of the light? Good things always come. That's what my sister Barbara Dullknife always said. Good things always come. After the hard times, Mitankala, the good times always come. There's always something to be grateful for. This day today, 6 years ago, one of the greatest men I've ever known passed away into the spirit world. It was my brother-in-law, Buzz, young man afraid of his horses. An amazing spirit. An amazing spirit. And I remember just before he passed, he called me from the hospital in Rapid City. He had cancer. And he said, sister-in-law, my grandfathers came to me from spirit. They found my pony. They found my pony. And they're bringing it to me so that I can join them in the camp. And I said to him, Buzz, is it beautiful? And he said, it's so beautiful what they showed me, where I'm going. You know, they told me that when they found my pony, they would come to get me. And they found my pony, and they're coming to get me. Take good care of Barbara. Stay close to Barbara. And I said to him, I will do that. I love you, Buzz. I love you too, sister-in-law. And the next day he passed. And I thought to myself, the legacy that he leaves, both in family members and in my memories of him, and the wisdom that I gained from him, through the hardships, the darkest times sometimes of his life became his wisdom. And he passed those wisdoms not only on to me, but to everyone who knew him. This evening in Fort Robinson, Nebraska, is the beginning of the Fort Robinson Outbreak Spiritual Run. Gathering Thunder Foundation, my foundation, sponsors the annual breakfast for all of the youth and their supporters as they make their way, as their ancestors did over 150 years ago, from Fort Robinson back up to Montana. And during that run, they stopped there in South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, where many of them, like Grandpa Dullknife, were left with the Lakota people to be raised. If you take a look at the piece that I shared on Facebook, you'll see Chief Dullknife sitting on the right and Chief Little Wolf sitting to his, I guess it would be Grandpa Dullknife's left. So Chief Little Wolf and Chief Dullknife are in the cover of that particular piece. And look at the legacy that they left. Look at the legacy that they left. The wisdom that they left. See, none of us goes into the darkened places or the dark times just for the sake of experiencing that. We always go there to gain wisdom, to gain knowledge, to gain insight, to gain the light, to hone our light. That's why. And we may not all pass and leave legacies like Chief Dullknife or Martin Luther King or a variety of other amazing human beings. But we leave our legacy, we leave our imprint on our family members, on our community, our spiritual community, our physical community, our community of family, by whatever definition that is. You know, one of the things that growing up as an adopted person, these gifts of the Spirit that I have raised a lot of eyebrows. For some, not all, and that's common. It was really a wonderful relief last week when I was talking to my cousin Corey, and she explained to me that on my mother's side of the family, there are lots of seers. Part of the family tradition to have the gifts, to believe in the gifts, to understand the gifts. What a beautiful thing. Took me 56 years to find that out, and I am joyful for this day of finding it out. I always wondered where it came from, and I suspect it probably comes from both sides of the family, honestly. And what do we do with that wisdom? You know, one of my greatest memories of being with Buzz was there at the Stronghold on the reservation, and he and I were having a Coca-Cola and having some Traverse City cherries, while David Fix and my husband were rooting around down there in the Badlands like a couple of mountain goats. And he said to me, you know, Denise, my great-great-grandfather, chief young man afraid of his horses, had 3 wives, and one of them, a medicine woman, explained to me that explained to my grandfather explained to my father, and I'm sharing it with you now, that each and every one of us is born with a medicine. Every one of us is born with gifts and talents. And as great-great-grandmother explained, it's what we do with those gifts and talents. Well, none of us hones our gifts and our talents and our experiences without going into the dark night. I don't believe. Or as Laurie Bruno says, right, with every ounce of light that we carry will always be matched and challenged by that same degree of darkness, because there is the rub by which the friction ensues and the growth is attained. This is the season of taking a look at where the growth can be attained. Perhaps we haven't come to that point yet. Perhaps we're still working through the experiences of hurt or anger or disbelief. All of those are valid. It's how long do we hang on to those experiences? What do we allow them to do to us? Do we allow them to win? Or do we take a look at those experiences and over time come to say, I no longer need that stone of wisdom. Thank you. I think I'll bury that. It's good. Plant that in my stone garden over there. As a reminder, but not simply as something that continues to weigh me down. Or do we continue to polish that and say, oh, that's become one of my most precious and priceless wisdom stones. One of my most priceless and precious wisdom stones. Being a seer myself, seeing that face of my daddy, George Robert Billy King. They simply called him Billy. Vietnam veteran. Took a look at his military record the other day. So both my biological daddy and my adoptive daddy, the Sarge, both Vietnam veterans. Both served in the Army for 20 years. Both come from a long line of men and women in the military. My great-great-granddaddy was a member of the Confederate Army in the great state of Georgia. My brother Guy, chieftain of the Oceti-Sakowee, in other words, the war chieftain. Interesting. What's to be learned from that? What's to be gleaned from that? Well, you know, I can take a look back at both of my fathers, and the more that I learn about my biological father, I understand what war does, what war can do, and the realities of it. It becomes a place of compassion within me for those that come back from war. War overseas, domestic war, war within their minds, war within their bodies, war within their families, their friends. So many forms of war and warring. What do we do with the wisdom of that? I remember my dad, the Sarge, saying, war is hell. And I will never go back to war. Right? Wise words. There are so many forms of that word war and warrior. What does the warrior learn? Like my brother Guy, also a Vietnam veteran. Love one another. Love one another. I talked to him the other day, my brother Guy. He called me. He said, "Sister, I haven't talked to you in a while. You got time to talk?" I said, "Well, yeah, let me go get a cup of coffee." He said, "Okay." So he poured himself a cup of coffee. I had myself a cup of coffee. And we sat on the phone for almost an hour. He said, "You know, sister, they've made me the spiritual leader." I said, "They have?" He said, "Yeah, Leonard, he's pretty ill." "He's pretty ill, sister." He meant Leonard Crow Dog. I said, "Well, what a wonderful thing. I'm assuming you mean spiritual leader of the American Indian movement." He said, "Yeah. Yep." He said, "I don't know what right I have to that as a spiritual leader." He said, "People call me all the time now. They want me to help them spiritually." And I said, "Guy, Tiblo, which means brother, you have more experience at becoming a spiritual director and mentor than almost anybody I know. And it comes from all of the darkest places that you've seen, that you've touched, that you've smelled, that you've heard, that you've felt. And not only in all of your tours of Vietnam, but who you are in Indian country with the American Indian movement. I think it's made you a wonderful spiritual leader. You understand what goodness does to the soul, and you understand what war does to the soul, and you understand how all of that contributes to the strengthening of your soul and your light. Congratulations, brother. I think it's wonderful." He said, I'm just me. I'm just me. I said, "And that's the beauty of it, Guy. You're just you. And all of the experiences of your life have made you, you. And the American Indian movement has a wonderful new spiritual leader in you." Oh, we sat and we talked for a good long time about just about everything, he and I. And he shared his wisdom with me. He's got a whole lot of it. He's got a whole lot of it. You've got a whole lot of it. I've got some of it, based on my experiences. And we're always being gifted with experiences and opportunities to gain more wisdom, to share, to hold in our pocket just for ourselves, to help mold us, to help us become. Life, human life, fascinating. And in the end, we all go home, as it says in the Dhammapada. In the end, we all go home, and we rejoice in the experiences, and we review them once again, and our soul and our light grows. And then one day we all come back out again to play and to build and to experience once more. Out of the void came the light. Brilliant. With that, everyone, thank you for joining me this morning. Thank you for shining your light as only you can shine it. So get out there and shine. Take time to reflect. Take time to let go. Take time to polish, to tumble, to bury, to live. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Blessings be.